If you've been on Etsy for any amount of time, you've probably had this moment. You change something that seems sensible. A cleaner title, better tags, a stronger description, and for a few days, you feel good about it. Then, the listing just goes flat. Views soften, clicks drop, and the worst part is you can't point to anything that's obviously wrong. That's what this is about, not tips. Just why the common SEO fixes can quietly make a listing worse. And I want to say this up front because it matters. When this happens, it doesn't mean you're careless, or that you don't understand Etsy, or that you ruined your shop. Most sellers do what they're told to do. They improve things, they refine, they optimize. The problem is that Etsy listings aren't like a blog post where you can keep polishing forever. A listing is more like a working system. It has momentum, patterns, and continuity. And a lot of SEO fixes break continuity without you realizing. One of the strangest parts of Etsy is how small edits can have outsized effects. And I'm not talking about conspiracy stuff, just basic reality. A listing collects signals over time. People search, click, favorite, buy, return later, share, compare. That pattern builds a kind of shape around the listing. When you change key parts of it, you're not just improving text. You can change what searches it appears in, what buyers expect, and who Etsy shows it to first. Sometimes, the system reacts like it's a new listing. A lot of sellers forget that a listing often settles into a steady audience. Not perfect, not viral, just steady. It shows up for a certain kind of buyer, with a certain expectation. Maybe they want quick delivery. Maybe they want a specific style. Maybe they're browsing gifts. When you change titles and tags, you might be chasing a better keyword. But you can also be swapping out the audience the listing was already working for. And the new audience might click less, save less, and buy less. This is where it gets frustrating, because your new title can be better in a general sense. More descriptive, cleaner, more keyword-rich. But Etsy doesn't reward better writing. It rewards a good match between what the buyer typed, what they expected, and what they did next. So if your change makes the listing appear in slightly different searches, you can end up with more impressions but weaker clicks, or clicks from the wrong people. And then, Etsy reads that as, maybe this listing isn't as relevant anymore. Another common move is stuffing in more keywords to cover more ground. And I get why people do it. It feels safe, like you're casting a wider net. But a wider net often catches lower intent buyers. People who are browsing, not buying. Or people looking for a slightly different version of what you sell. And when the listing gets that kind of traffic, the engagement signals can weaken. You didn't make the product worse. You just made the listing less clear about what it's truly for. Here's a very normal scenario. A seller notices a drop. They panic a bit. Then they do a full refresh. New title, new tags, new first photo, new description opening, maybe new price, maybe new category. That's not weird. That's human. But from a systems point of view, you've just changed 5 or 6 variables at the same time. And if performance shifts after that, you don't know what caused it. Worse, Etsy can't learn what's working because the listing never stabilizes. People get uncomfortable with the word algorithm, but think of it as a learning system. It learns what your listing is, who it's for, and what happens after people see it. That learning takes time and repeated patterns. If you keep changing the core descriptors, you keep interrupting the learning process. That's why some sellers feel like they're always starting over. They're constantly improving, but never letting the listing settle long enough for the system to build confidence in it. Stability is an input, not just an outcome. Another thing that causes accidental damage is treating every SEO element like a separate checkbox. Title, tags, attributes, categories, description. In real life, they work together. They form a single meaning profile. If you change the title toward one intent, but keep tags aimed at another, you create mixed signals. That can put you in weird search buckets, or make you rank for terms where you look sort of relevant, but not strongly relevant. And sort of relevant usually means weaker clicks, weaker saves, weaker purchases. Even when a change improves search visibility, it can still reduce sales, because visibility isn't the whole job. The listing has to meet expectations. If your new title attracts buyers expecting something slightly different, they might click, then bounce, or scroll and hesitate, or favorite but not buy. That behavior matters. Etsy reads buyer hesitation as a relevance problem, so your well-intentioned SEO fix can increase the amount of mismatch, and mismatch is poison for conversion signals over time. Momentum is a real thing on Etsy. When a listing gets steady engagement, it tends to keep getting shown in similar places to similar buyers. Not forever, but it can hold. When you make a significant edit, you can break that momentum. Sometimes you'll see a short spike because Etsy is testing the updated version, and sellers often mistake that for a success. Then the test ends, the listing drops, and the seller thinks they need another fix. That creates a loop. Edit, test, drop, edit again. If you take one idea from this video, it's this. The fix loop is often more damaging than the original issue. The original issue might be, you're not ranking as high as you want, or your conversion is a bit soft. But when you enter a constant fixing cycle, you turn a manageable situation into instability, and instability makes it impossible to interpret data. You can't learn what buyers respond to because the listing never sits still. So you end up reacting to noise instead of patterns. So what do you do instead? You start separating safe changes from identity changes. Safe changes are things that don't change what the listing is fundamentally about. Maybe improving clarity in a paragraph, maybe replacing a confusing photo with a clearer one while keeping the same promise. Identity changes are title and tag shifts that change search, intent, and audience. Those should be done carefully and slowly, one at a time, with time to observe. Not because Etsy is fragile, but because signals need a stable baseline to be meaningful. Etsy sellers check stats daily. That's normal. But most meaningful listing shifts happen over weeks, not days. If you change something and check the next morning, you're mostly seeing randomness, daily traffic cycles, or temporary testing. That's why sellers feel like they're chasing the algorithm. They're judging long-term decisions with short-term data. A healthier approach is to make one intentional change. Document what you changed, then give it enough time to settle. Otherwise, you're just stacking edits on top of each other. There are times when changing SEO is the right move. If a listing is clearly attracting the wrong buyer, if you're ranking for irrelevant searches, if your title is genuinely misleading, or if the product itself has evolved and the listing no longer matches reality. The point isn't never edit. The point is, don't treat editing like a nervous habit. Treat it like an operational decision. And don't do it from fear. Do it from a clear diagnosis. What's wrong? What needs to change? And what must stay stable? A stability rule that helps a lot is this. Keep the listing's identity stable while you improve clarity around it. In practice, that means you pick the core intent you want the listing to serve, and you protect it. Then you improve supporting pieces without constantly rewriting the meaning. If you want to test a new intent, do it with a new listing, or a controlled experiment on one listing, not the whole shop. The big mistake is changing the identity of your best performers because you got bored or nervous. The sellers who scale fastest usually aren't the ones who do the most tweaks. They're the ones who reduce randomness. They build a workflow that keeps listings consistent, keeps product data clean, and stops them from rewriting everything every week. They still improve, but they improve with control. That's the difference, not effort. Control. If you're tired and you're trying to grow, the best thing you can do is remove the need to constantly fix things. Protect stability and let small improvements compound instead of resetting. Most Etsy SEO fixes make listings worse when they break stability, shift the audience, or create mixed signals. If you want listings to improve, the goal isn't constant optimizing. It's controlled change, with enough time for the system to learn what you meant. More explanations like this coming to the channel.